Hi, welcome to our channel where we share the most intriguing stories. When Trevor McCain returned to his quiet Texas land after years away, he expected trees and silence, not a neon-lit pizza joint swarming with kids. What he found wasn't just trespass, it was fraud, lies, and a fake signature. They thought he was gone for good. They were dead wrong. I remember the sound my tires made when they left the paved county road and crunched down onto the familiar gravel path that cut through the rise of my 10-acre lot in New Braunfels. The tires hissed against the rocks like they recognized the place, even if I barely did. I slowed to a crawl, rolling past the thickets of cedar and oak, expecting to see the quiet, untouched landscape I'd walked 100 times before I left. But something was wrong. Way wrong. The first red flag wasn't even red. It was neon orange. A plastic valet parking sign stood crooked near the fence post I'd built 5 years ago. Just beyond it, I caught sight of a broad parking lot lined with painted stripes and ringed in decorative stones. What the hell? I blinked and kept driving, half expecting the scene to dissolve like a heat mirage. Instead, I saw umbrellas, picnic tables, a plastic jungle gym shaped like a slice of pizza, and then the kicker, glowing in cheap LED letters atop a brick facade, Red Rock Crust Family Pizza. I braked hard. A couple kids darted past the hood of my truck, one of them chasing a balloon shaped like a pepperoni. A woman in a visor waved me toward the guest parking zone with all the cheer of a Six Flags greeter. I ignored her and pulled off to the side, parked half on grass, half in disbelief. I climbed out and just stared for a solid minute. There was a paved patio where my pond used to be. A steel trash corral stood where I'd marked out my future house's foundation with survey flags. The entire eastern third of my property, had been transformed into what looked like a fully operational, fast casual pizza joint, complete with a big red banner that said, "Proudly sponsored by High Ridge HOA." A teenage hostess greeted me before I could even shut the truck door. "Hi there, are you dining in or taking out?" she chirped. "HOA members get 15% off with your access card." I blinked. "Excuse me?" "Access card," she repeated. "You with High Ridge, right? Or are you from Oak Run? We honor both." "I'm Trevor McCain," I said, my voice flatter than a dead battery. "And this is my land." She tilted her head. "Like, you're the owner?" I nodded slowly. She backed off a step and mumbled something into a walkie-talkie clipped to her apron. 30 seconds later, a woman I'd never seen before stormed around the side of the building like she owned not just the pizza place, but the sun it was under. Mid-50s, short blonde bob, pantsuit in 90-degree heat. She radiated HOA energy before she even opened her mouth. "You must be Trevor," she said with a thin smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Karen Reeves, president of the High Ridge Hills Homeowners Association. I was wondering when you'd finally show up." "I'm sorry, you were what?" I asked, stepping forward. "This is my land. I bought it 5 years ago. I've got the title, deed, survey, the works. You people built a pizza joint on it." She sighed like I was a frustrating student who hadn't done the reading. "Mr. McCain, when no one's seen hide nor hair of you for over 3 years, the property falls under abandonment principles. You hadn't even posted a mailing address. We initiated a temporary use agreement for community benefit. The Red Rock Crust location here serves hundreds of residents in the area. It's an amenity now." My jaw clenched. "I never gave permission for anything. I didn't sign anything. There's no agreement." "Oh, but you did," she said, pulling out a laminated sheet of paper from her oversized purse. "Here's your signed authorization form, Mr. McCain. You, or rather someone listed as Travis McCain, clearly approved a community usage license for parcel 7B. That's this lot." I snatched the paper from her hand. I didn't even have to look hard to see the signature wasn't mine. It was slanted, loopy, almost girlish. And it wasn't even my name. It said Travis, not Trevor. There were other red flags too. The date, the contact number, the notarized stamp from someone I'd never heard of. "This is a forgery," I said coldly. "That's not my name. That's not my signature. You built a commercial business on land you don't own." Karen's eyes narrowed, but the fake smile never fully disappeared. "Let's keep this civil. You've been gone a long time. Maybe we made an administrative error, but I suggest you don't stir up trouble over something that can be negotiated. Besides, look around." She gestured at the kids playing, the tables full of families. "This place is doing good for the community." "I'm not interested in negotiations," I said. You have 24 hours to shut this down or I'm calling the sheriff. Karen's mask slipped just enough to reveal the steel behind it. Do that, and you'll be dealing with lawyers. And let me remind you, Texas law doesn't look kindly on people who abandon property for years and show up with demands. We're on solid ground here, Mr. McCain. Very solid. I didn't respond. I just turned on my heel, got back into the truck, and drove to the edge of the property, my property, and parked where I could still see the neon sign glowing like a middle finger. I reached into the glove compartment, pulled out my folder of documents, and opened the deed. Still in my name. Clear as day. They thought I'd never come back. They were wrong. I barely slept that night. I set up camp in the back of my truck, just off the gravel drive near the tree line, with a folding chair, a thermos of burnt gas station coffee, and a pair of binoculars. It wasn't the most dignified way to reclaim your land, but I wanted to see exactly how far these people would go. Sure enough, just after sunrise, the pizzeria lights flicked on like nothing had happened. Delivery trucks pulled in. Workers filed out the back door. The smell of dough and cheap mozzarella wafted through the morning air like a middle finger. I made a list. Step 1. Confirm the paperwork. I drove straight into town and parked outside the county assessor's office. The receptionist was a young guy named Ben who clearly didn't get paid enough to care, but he perked up when I dropped my name and parcel number. "Ah, yeah," he said, tapping at his keyboard. "We have some unusual notations on that one." I leaned in. "Unusual how?" "There was an attempt to file for temporary community use designation about 3.5 years ago, but it was never finalized because the title chain wasn't clean. There's also a note here about a name discrepancy on the permission slip, filed under Travis instead of Trevor. The county flagged it, but I guess it got overridden." "Overridden by who?" He squinted. "Looks like someone from the municipal permitting office pushed it through manually. You'd have to talk to building and development for that." I thanked him and headed 3 blocks down to the B&D office, already feeling the knots forming in my neck. At the front desk, I asked for records of any permits issued for my lot. The woman pulled out a thin folder with my parcel number, but most of the pages were copies of the same document, a temporary commercial structure permit signed by the late Arnold Givens, the man who sold me the land. "But he died 5 years ago," I said. "I bought the land from him myself." She blinked. "Well, this permit was submitted a year after that, and notarized, though that signature's odd, doesn't match the original deeds." I asked for a copy and took photos of everything. The signature on the permit looked like someone had tried to mimic Arnold's handwriting with their left foot. My stomach twisted. It was official. This wasn't just an HOA being pushy, this was organized fraud. On my way back out, I passed the town clerk's office and popped in. I figured, hell, why stop now? I asked to see the notary listed on the fake permit. The clerk gave me a squint and said, "Oh yeah, that's Candace. Well, let's just say she notarizes a lot of HOA filings, lives up in High Ridge, regular poker buddy of Karen Reeves." Of course she is. By lunchtime, I was sitting in my truck, staring at a growing stack of forged documents. I called the sheriff's department to file a report, and the deputy on duty said someone would reach out soon. That was code for don't hold your breath. So I did the next best thing. I called a friend of mine from Austin, David Holland, a real estate attorney who used to moonlight as a complete bulldog. He picked up after 2 rings. "Trevor, you're alive?" "Barely. I've got a situation." 30 minutes later, I was back at the edge of my lot, phone clamped between my shoulder and ear while I snapped pictures of the pizzeria from different angles. David didn't interrupt much. He just listened as I explained everything, the fake signature, the bogus permit, the HOA's stunt. "That's not a land use dispute," he said when I finished. "That's a goddamn raid. They forged consent and used your property to generate revenue. That's conversion, trespassing, civil fraud, and if we dig deeper, maybe criminal conspiracy." I was hoping you'd say something like that. "We're filing an injunction first thing Monday." When I hung up, I saw something I hadn't noticed before, a laminated flyer pinned to a wooden post near the parking lot. I walked over. It read, "Red Rock Crust is proud to be part of High Ridge Hills HOA. This community facility exists thanks to the generosity of local landowners. We are grateful for their contributions." Their contributions. My contribution. Was the asphalt strip across what used to be my wildflower meadow now a donation? I yanked the sign from the post and chucked it onto the hood of my truck. I didn't care if they heard it inside. Let them hear. Let them know the guy they thought was never coming back had just begun. Monday morning came fast. I was back at the county courthouse before the coffee shops had finished unlocking their doors. David had filed the injunction remotely at dawn, and we were both waiting to speak with the clerk when Karen Reeves strutted through the front doors like she was late for a ribbon cutting. She saw me, offered a tight little smirk, and gave a condescending nod like I was some bumbling intern who'd accidentally filed a form upside down. We didn't speak. I didn't need to. I had everything I needed in the folder under my arm, copies of the fake signatures, the forged permit, the mismatched name records, and the email chain where I'd confirmed Arnold Givens had been dead for over a year before signing that permit. By noon, the judge had granted our request for a temporary injunction. All commercial activity on my land was to cease immediately pending investigation. An officer from the sheriff's department was assigned to deliver the order directly to the pizzeria and observe compliance. I followed him back to my property in my truck, watching the red and blue lights bounce off the gravel and tree trunks like fireworks. Karen was already there, arms crossed, standing on the patio with a few flustered employees when the deputy approached. He handed her the papers and asked to speak to the manager. She read the first few lines and her expression barely changed. Just a slightly tighter smile, a little more stiffness around the eyes. "This is ridiculous," she said. "There must be some mistake." "No mistake, ma'am," the deputy replied. "You're to shut down operations immediately. That includes food service, deliveries, anything involving customer access. You're on private property without proper authorization." She exhaled through her nose like a tea kettle that had just barely started to boil. "We'll comply, of course," she said with venomous politeness. "But I want it on record that this is a political move by someone who abandoned the community and now wants to punish it." "Lady," I said, stepping forward, "I didn't abandon anything. I worked my ass off for 4 years to put together the money to build a life here. That land was mine when I left, and it's still mine now. You built a pizza theme park on it like it was a sandbox." She ignored me, turned to her staff, and started barking orders about refrigeration and food disposal. The employees moved like nervous school kids caught cheating. One of them muttered, "Sorry, man," as he unplugged the soda fountain. The place shut down by the end of the day, and I could finally breathe. I walked the perimeter of the property that evening with a flashlight, taking stock. The parking lot had been poured over a natural slope I used to sit on to watch the sunset. They'd bulldozed wild cedar stands to make room for a dumpster pad. There was a weird plastic gazebo near the back fence with a fake wishing well built from bricks that didn't even match the native stone. David called that night with news. "We're going beyond the injunction," he said. "I'm preparing a suit for damages and seeking a discovery order. I want full financial records from the HOA and the pizzeria." "Good," I said. "I want to know exactly how much money they've made squatting on my damn property." "Here's the thing," he added. "I've been digging into their tax filings. The pizzeria is technically listed as a community resource center under a nonprofit charter. That means all proceeds go to the HOA, not to a private business, not even to employees. It's pure HOA income." I blinked. "You're telling me they've been running a fake pizza charity?" "Not fake, technically," he said, "but extremely suspicious. And if they've filed that way for years, they've been getting tax breaks. The IRS might want a word." That got my attention. We didn't just have a property dispute now. We had a full-blown web of fraud and financial games built over 4 years of illegal occupation. I called up an old buddy of mine, Miguel, who worked for the local power company, and asked for a favor. Within a day, he sent over documentation confirming what I feared. The electric hookup for the pizzeria had been registered under temporary community use authorization with a signature from, you guessed it, Travis McCain. Same thing with water. Same with trash collection. All done under a ghost identity built from a typo and a forged consent form. It was a paper trail of lies, and I was finally holding all the breadcrumbs. Late that night, I walked out into the center of what used to be my open meadow and sat on the cracked pavement near one of the dead landscape lights. It was dark and quiet for the first time since I'd come back. I looked up at the stars and clenched the paperwork in my hands. They thought I'd forget this place. They thought I'd never come back. But now, I had a paper trail and a wrecking ball with their name on it. I figured that once the pizzeria shut its doors, things might cool off. Maybe they'd see the writing on the wall, pack up their pizza ovens, and vanish back into the suburban swamp they crawled out of. But if anything, Karen and her HOA doubled down. 2 days after the injunction, I drove into town to pick up new surveying stakes. My old ones had been plowed under or paved over, and when I returned, I found a crowd of people standing near the parking lot, a dozen or more. Some had folding chairs. Some had signs. One of the signs said, "Don't bulldoze our pizza place." Another, "Trevor Tarr's landlord tyrant." They were protesting. Karen stood out front in a red cardigan and oversized sunglasses like she was campaigning for office. She was giving some kind of speech into a megaphone, her voice echoing off the old retaining wall they'd poured behind the patio. "We built something beautiful here," she was saying, "something that brought joy and flavor and unity. And now a man who abandoned this land for years wants to tear it all down over a piece of paper." I didn't stop. I just parked and stepped out of my truck like I wasn't walking into a ridiculous fever dream. Phones came out immediately, people recording, whispering, clearly waiting for some showdown. I raised my voice just enough to cut through the murmuring. This is private land. It still is. Always has been. This wasn't a community project. It was theft, dressed up in pepperoni. Someone booed. Karen lifted her megaphone again. "This land sat unused for years. We turned it into something valuable. For the people." "No," I said. "You turned it into a cash register. And not just any cash register, one that funnels every damn dollar into your HOA slush fund." Silence. Then a murmur. Then someone asked, "Is that true?" I turned to face the crowd directly. "You all think this is about pizza, but it's about fraud. Every time you bought a slice, that money didn't go to employees. It didn't go to taxes. It went straight into High Ridge HOA's accounts. And guess whose name was never on a single line of permission?" A kid from the crowd shouted, "Yours?" "Damn right," I said. "And the guy whose name they used doesn't even exist." They used forged documents and faked signatures to get power lines, water, permits, all of it. The county's investigating. The IRS is next. Karen was frozen. For the first time, she looked like she didn't have a speech ready. I didn't wait around. I walked to the back of the property where I'd reinstalled a small motion-activated trail camera. The last time I'd looked at it was years ago, when all I expected to see were deer and raccoons. But this time, the SD card had gold on it. I popped it into my laptop back in town and scrubbed through. Dusty footage, low quality, but clear enough. There she was, Karen Reeves, standing near the cleared field, talking to two men in contractor vests. Her voice crackled on the tiny speaker. "Don't worry about permits. McCain's long gone. If he ever comes back, we'll deal with it then. This is community land now." My blood ran cold. It was the smoking gun, not just neglect, not just oops paperwork. It was conscious, premeditated occupation, trespass, and fraud, spoken straight into the camera lens with all the arrogance in the world. I emailed the clip to David that night. He responded 10 minutes later. "This is it. We're going nuclear." The next morning, he filed motions to subpoena all HOA bank records, vendor contracts, internal communications, and correspondence related to Red Rock Crust. We wanted to know where every penny went and who signed off on what. And then we filed a formal complaint with the Texas State Comptroller's Office and the Department of Public Safety, including a copy of the video, all permit discrepancies, and forged utility applications, fraud, conspiracy, identity falsification. By Thursday, the sheriff's office sent investigators to the HOA office. The pizza oven stayed cold, the patio chairs stacked and abandoned. The protest signs started to disappear. So did the protesters. I wasn't done yet. I reached out to a reporter from the Austin Herald, a guy I'd gone to school with. I gave him the full package: documents, photos, timeline, the footage. His editor called it the most ridiculous land grab in hill country history. The article went live on Friday under the headline, "Pizza, Permits, and Property Theft: How an HOA Tried to Eat One Man's Land." That weekend, everything changed. Phones started ringing. Emails flooded in. Former HOA members reached out anonymously, spilling details about Karen's personal projects and mysterious budget lines. Someone leaked an HOA meeting recording where Karen bragged about repurposing wasted land. The avalanche had begun. It didn't take long for the fallout to hit. By the following Monday, the county clerk's office was backed up with calls from residents demanding to know how a community pizza center had been built without proper oversight. HOA board members started resigning, quietly at first, then in waves. One woman left a handwritten note taped to the HOA bulletin board. "I had no idea. I'm sorry." Meanwhile, David was in full predator mode. He'd obtained a preliminary injunction to freeze all financial transactions on the HOA's primary and subsidiary accounts, citing active investigation and risk of asset concealment. At the same time, the court granted our discovery motion, forcing High Ridge HOA to turn over all financial documents related to the pizzeria, including bank transfers, vendor payments, internal memos, utility agreements, and construction contracts. What we uncovered was worse than I imagined. Over the course of 4 years, Red Rock Crust had generated over $680,000 in gross revenue. That money hadn't gone to a legitimate business entity or to a trust for the neighborhood. It had gone straight into HOA accounts, then immediately reallocated into nebulous community initiatives, most of which were either fake or grossly inflated. Line items included public beautification, 17 Sal and 400, which turned out to be 2 flower beds in front of Karen's own house. Outdoor seating and upgrades, $42,000. Half of it went to a patio set purchased for her back porch. Legal, consultancy, $26,000, paid to a firm run by her cousin out of San Marcos. There were also thousands spent on luxury catering, event rentals, and a conference in Florida that had zero paper trail tying it to any real HOA function. David's words echoed in my head. They used your land as their piggy bank. But we weren't done. The icing on the pizza came from the utility records. With Miguel's help, we confirmed that every service hookup, water, electric, gas, trash, had been activated using permits with forged names and fraudulent owner consent. I had him print out copies of the permit requests, complete with the forged signature of Travis McCain. I sat there in my truck, flipping through them, reading the same fake scribble over and over again like a personal insult. Then came the real knockout. David subpoenaed the surveillance footage from the energy company's smart meter logs. They had thermal and power usage data from the day the pizzeria opened, and a time-stamped clip of Karen herself standing with the city inspector during the inspection. She signed off on the hookup using a fake title, Authorized Proxy for Landowner. My fists clenched involuntarily when I saw that clip. We had everything. The final move before filing the civil suit was assembling an expert report. We brought in an independent surveyor, a structural engineer, and an accountant specializing in land use violations. They documented unauthorized grading that destroyed protected tree lines, soil compaction that could damage future foundations, asphalt poured without stormwater planning, revenue laundering through non-HOA businesses connected to Karen's husband, and then there was the landscaping. Half the decorative rock beds had been stolen from a nearby county park under the guise of excess stone. That part, hilariously, came from a whistleblower who used to work maintenance for the county and recognized the exact flagstone because he installed it himself. By the end of that week, our case file was a warhammer. On Friday morning, we filed a full-scale civil lawsuit against High Ridge HOA, naming Karen Reeves personally, along with 3 other board members who had signed off on permits and payments. The charges included fraud, criminal trespass, unjust enrichment, conversion of property, forgery, construction without authorization, environmental damage. We also filed for punitive damages and a permanent injunction seeking to demolish all unauthorized structures and return the land to me in its original state. David estimated the total value of the claim at over $1.2 million. The courthouse hadn't even processed the full filing before the HOA's law firm called David and tried to settle. He didn't even let them finish their offer. "We'll see you in court," he told them. That night, I walked out to the edge of the ruined meadow and stood under the stars again. The breeze smelled like cut grass and asphalt. It was quiet, finally. And then a noise broke through the stillness. Someone was creeping through the shadows near the dumpster pad. I stepped forward, flashlight in hand, and spotted a teenage kid with a can of spray paint. He was halfway through writing "Trevor is a thief" in bright orange across one of the plywood barricades. "It's spelled with an O," I said, and flipped on the flashlight. He bolted like a jackrabbit, and I didn't bother chasing. I just stood there, staring at the half-finished insult, listening to the wind. They could vandalize, protest, spin their stories, but the numbers, the footage, the signatures, they couldn't run from that. The court date was set. 3 weeks from now, we'd walk into the Comal County Courthouse with more evidence than some drug cases see in federal court. But that didn't mean things got quiet. If anything, they got worse. The day after the lawsuit went public, I found a crumpled letter shoved under my windshield wiper. No envelope, just a piece of HOA stationery with jagged handwriting in red ink. "You're tearing our neighborhood apart. This was our place. You don't belong here anymore." I didn't even bother showing it to David. It was petty intimidation and amateur hour compared to what came next. 2 days later, someone filed a complaint with the local fire marshal alleging that my camper trailer, the same one I was living in while preparing to build my house, violated temporary dwelling regulations. At 6 in the morning, I was awoken by a knock and a flashlight through the window. The fire marshal was polite but firm. "We got an anonymous tip that you're storing hazardous materials on site," he said. "Mind if we take a look?" They found nothing, no violations, but the timing was deliberate. It was Karen's last play, weaponizing bureaucracy. She couldn't control the courts, so now she was trying to drown me in red tape. Then came the trucks. One morning, while walking the boundary lines, I heard engines in the distance. Not my crew, not neighbors. I followed the sound and found a landscaping company unloading pallets of sod, gravel, and benches just beyond the property line, but on my land. I walked up to the supervisor. "Morning. Who ordered this?" He glanced at a clipboard. "Work order from High Ridge Hills HOA. Community park expansion. You're not the owner, right?" I stared at him. "I'm the only owner of this land." He turned pale. "Sir, we were told this was HOA easement land. We didn't know." I made a call to the sheriff. 2 deputies showed up within 20 minutes, confirmed the plat boundaries, and ordered the workers to cease operations. The company agreed to file a written statement confirming they were misled about the land's ownership. I had the whole thing on video. That afternoon, David called me. "They're panicking," he said. 2 of the board members just filed their own affidavits claiming they were misled by Karen. They're flipping. He sent me the copies, signed and notarized. In both, the board members stated that they were told Trevor McCain had abandoned the land indefinitely and that Karen had secured temporary permission to repurpose it. One even wrote, "If I had known the documents were falsified, I would have never signed off on the budget allocations." I didn't smile when I read it, not because it wasn't a win, but because it was one more confirmation of how deep this went. Karen had run the HOA like a petty kingdom, and now her knights were deserting her. But the most surreal moment came later that week. A reporter from Channel 7 drove up my dusty road with a cameraman in tow. They wanted to do an on-site interview, capture the place, show the damage, give a face to the lawsuit. I agreed, figuring it might help drown out the HOA's smear campaign. I stood in front of the gutted pizzeria, the Red Rock Crust sign half dangling from rusted bolts, and told my story. I showed them the false signatures, the energy logs, the unauthorized construction. I pointed to the now abandoned patio where families used to eat under string lights, and I said, "This was never a park. It was never for the community. It was stolen, and I want it back." The piece aired that night. Emails poured in. So did calls from other property owners in Texas, some of whom had fought similar battles with HOAs over overreach, land grabs, and forged permissions. One guy in Houston said, "They tried to claim my horse barn was on HOA-maintained land. I had to hire 3 lawyers just to keep my damn fence." The tide was turning. And then, one last twist. David called me at 8 p.m., voice sharper than usual. "Trevor," he said, "you're going to want to see this." We got a document dump from the HOA's legal team. Someone just turned over a file labeled Contingency Plan. Inside is a scanned letter, dated 2 years ago. It's Karen, writing to a contractor. She refers to you as presumed deceased. I froze. She told them you were likely dead. That's how she justified fast-tracking the construction. I sat there in silence, phone in hand, staring out at the dark meadow. They had literally declared me dead, on paper, to steal my land. The day of the preliminary hearing arrived with heavy skies and Texas humidity so thick you could chew it. I sat on a wooden bench outside Courtroom B, dressed in a gray button-down and the same boots I wore the day I found strangers eating pizza on my property. David sat next to me, calm and unreadable, holding a stack of organized folders like they were surgical instruments. Karen arrived 15 minutes late, wearing a navy blue pantsuit that looked like it had never seen sweat or shame. She was flanked by 2 attorneys and still had that smug twitch in her mouth, the one that always said, "This isn't real and I'm still in charge." She didn't even look at me. Inside, Judge Harmon, an older woman with a military-style posture and a no-nonsense glare, called the session to order. This wasn't the trial yet, but it was the first public hammer drop. A hearing on our motion for injunctive relief and discovery enforcement. Basically, we were asking the court to shut down the pizzeria immediately, order full financial disclosure from the HOA, impose a no-contact order between HOA members, and me, Karen's lawyer, open with a tired line. My client believed the land was unclaimed and acted in the interest of the community. David stood. We have notarized statements, permit forgeries, tax filings, utility records, surveillance footage, and now documentation that Ms. Reeves declared the rightful owner deceased while collecting over $600,000 in profit. Judge Harmon leaned forward. Did you just say the defendant filed a death assumption on a living man? David didn't flinch. In writing, Your Honor, dated, signed, and delivered to a contractor. For a moment, the room was absolutely silent. Then, the judge looked at Karen, who suddenly looked about 2 sizes smaller. Injunction granted, Harmon said, striking the gavel. All commercial activity on the property will cease immediately. Mr. McCain's land is off limits, and I am hereby issuing a preservation order on all HOA financial and communication records from the past 5 years. If I discover one deleted file, one missing invoice, there will be consequences. Karen's mouth opened as if to speak, but her own lawyer gently touched her arm. It was over. For now. Outside, the Channel 7 reporter waited again. I said nothing this time, just walked past the cameras, past the microphones, and into the parking lot. That same evening, the sheriff's department executed the injunction order. Deputies arrived at Red Rock Crust with folded papers and flashlights, handed the manager a cease and desist letter, and put chains around the patio gates. A sign went up, closed by order of Comal County Court. I watched from the shoulder of the road as employees filtered out one by one, confused and angry. A few of them looked at me with real hatred in their eyes, but not one of them could look me in the face for more than a second. That weekend, Karen made one final move. She showed up at my camper. I saw her coming from 50 feet away, stomping through the gravel like a general surveying a battlefield. I stepped out and met her halfway. You got what you wanted, she snapped. A ghost town and a pile of legal bills. You could have left it alone, I said. You could have built your pizzeria on land you owned. She didn't blink. That land wasn't being used. We improved it. I laughed. It just slipped out. By faking my death? You vanished for 4 years, she hissed. That's abandonment. I held up my phone, already recording. That's not how property law works, I said. And you're going to find out just how much it doesn't work like that. She glared at me, turned, and walked away, her heels kicking dust into the air. 2 days later, we received confirmation that the DA's office was reviewing our case for criminal prosecution. Charges were likely to include forgery, perjury, fraud, illegal land use, and conspiracy to commit property theft. David looked at me as we read the memo. They're not just going after the HOA, he said. They want Karen personally, and they've got her dead to rights. 3 months later, I sat in the courtroom again, this time wearing a charcoal suit I borrowed from my brother-in-law. The room buzzed with quiet tension. Not because people didn't know what was going to happen, but because everyone did. Karen Reeves stood at the defense table, wrists cuffed, eyes down. Her once immaculate blonde hair was tied back in a limp ponytail. The smugness was gone, so was the navy blue pantsuit. Today, she wore a drab county-issued jumpsuit and the look of someone who had finally realized the walls weren't just closing in. They'd already closed. The trial didn't last long. Once the prosecutors laid out the timeline, false documents, the fabricated signature from Travis McCain, the illegal construction, forged utility approvals, siphoning of business revenue directly into HOA accounts, it was over before it even began. But what truly ended her was the recording. The jury listened to her voice clear as day, captured by my old trail cameras. Yeah, come on, McCain's not coming back. He's probably dead. We're doing the town a favor. It'll be ours soon enough. That was the nail. The prosecution didn't even need a dramatic closing statement. The judge read out the verdict like reciting the weather. Guilty on all counts. Sentencing followed immediately. 12 years in state prison. No parole for at least 7. A personal restitution order of $1.2 million. Not to the court, not to the HOA, but directly to me. plus legal fees, property repair costs, and a separate civil judgment for emotional and reputational damage. When Karen was led away, she looked up just once and met my eyes. I didn't smile. I didn't nod. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt finished. 2 weeks later, High Ridge Hills HOA was formally dissolved by court order. Their charter was revoked. The board was disbanded. Several members took plea deals in exchange for testimony. One of them, a retired Air Force captain named Harold, contacted me personally. He came to the site, my land, with a six-pack and a handshake. "I'm sorry," he said. "I signed things I didn't understand." I believed her. I nodded. "I don't blame you. But I don't forget either." He understood. We drank one beer together in silence. Then he left. Over the next year, I rebuilt everything. First, I tore down what remained of the pizzeria. Foundation and all, sold off the equipment. Donated some of the benches to a local school. Then I brought in a construction crew I trusted, my own guys from past jobs, and we finally did it. The house I always wanted. High-ceilinged, wide porch, solar panels, and a custom workshop out back with enough space for all my tools and maybe even a vintage pickup one day. I paved over the old pizzeria parking lot and turned it into a personal courtyard. At the entrance, I had a local blacksmith forge a sign. It stands on a steel post near the road. It reads, "This land remembers its owner." Every now and then, a car drives past and slows down. Some people still remember. Others just see a house in the hills and wonder what it took to get there. I keep the court orders framed inside my office, not out of pride, just as a reminder. They thought I'd never come back. They thought the land was abandoned. But I was always coming home.